And what it does is it shows people in each one of these parts of the community dynamic what to detect right or wrong, what's going functional or dysfunctional. And it goes to the point of actually the books cover covert applications in community processes, which I adopted from a codified CIA manual which was used on how to destroy local communities. Now somebody did that. Who did that? Who did that? Well, you can run the paper trail and give you the names. So the community is going to have to go in, one, detect their situation, two, actually make informed decisions on how to get back into, it's going to take some remediation, such as getting the debt off people's back on these phony mortgage takings, these robberies, these usuries. And then there's a lot of people that have addressed this over and over. But we have to do it. We've got to get out of the I'm going to do it, or I'm going to talk about it. Now, when we go in and do deep field audits, we do this. We hand the people books and say, you now have to go figure this out. The hardest thing in the world that we've found is to find community members, and they say, here's the form, sign the bottom, what you just told me is wrong. Sign it, I'm going to give it to your adversary. They can't do it. Their hand shakes. They're going to, they're going to get me. And I tell them this, you as a cowardice person have to understand this, and I hope you can comprehend it. If you run, they will shoot you in the back. You are dealing with people, as Carl Lamb put it, that are chosen because they're sociopathic or psychopathic. And what you found in the indecency, and it's evidenced by the revulsion of the serial warfare engagement called the War on Terror, you're finding such a level of separation that now we use drones to go around and kill. We get a terrorist, but we kill 10. We kill 20, but we got a terrorist. We don't know the terrorist's name. We don't have any list of terrorists, but the numbers of terrorists killed in the so-called fake war is incredibly small compared to the number of people murdered and reclassified as collateral damage. Now, the word Holocaust is always people associate to very large numbers. A Holocaust for your family would be losing your spouse. A Holocaust to a community would be losing 10 more teenagers this week to suicide and drugs. And the media is purposeful, and it's protracted, and it's lost its credibility. But there is a portion of society, probably about 16%, 20%, that absolutely are infatuated by media, and they call it conversational hypnosis. In other words, the war is prosecuted on a tactical engagement basis. So in a community, if you want to divide a community, you go in and you talk tactics and strategies. Notice that word, strategy. And you play the regimes against one another in what they call structured conflict and controlled opposition, such as Democrats and Republicans.
Two wings of the same bird, isn't it? They're both globalists. They're both working for one world government.
Sure. So what we've done at Infraspect is we figured out not only a way to get people on the road to fixing their situations, getting the risks lowered. We've got to the point of actually being able to say, here's your basic ground rules on how to get along and regard each other. You know, the women's rights movement really took more away from women in America. It took their liberties and replaced them with supervised rights. And most of the women's organizations understand this, that the women lost liberty. They still don't get paid the same. They still have abuse, increased abuse this and increased abuse that. The budgets are flying at them. But really what they're doing is making sure that the men and women do not take responsibility between themselves. They don't regard each other. We're going to have an institution come in, and we're going to design deadbeat moms and deadbeat dads. In the Lakota situation, I think it was Diane Sawyer went in and was really shallow enough to put on the national news that Lakota women have children so they can get more welfare payments. Well, the Lakota didn't invent welfare payments. As we go forward with the indigenous identity theft paper, really what will happen in time is the people who want to go back and recreate this resilient community, whether they want to call it Liberty Village or whatever, they're going to see this. They're going to see the forms of theft because it applies to them, not just the Indian people. And I assure you that any tribal official that is listening to me needs to become ashamed of their actions. And every county official who was their hidden proxy partner needs to be ashamed, because the federal government has done its share of woes, but they had a partner all the way along the line, and that was their subdivision and their subordinate called a state. All of those articles, this talk about the states being sovereign and all that, the lawyers are really careful at this. And I'm looking at the case file on indigenous identity theft, and we have probably about 100 cases, and these are Supreme Court selections. And the reason is we've got to get at the truth. We have to get at it and say, here it is, and then we're not going to take a consensus.
That's how it's ruled right now. Consensus, if you sit there and keep your mouth shut when they're proposing this incredible New World Order, you are supporting them, you are backing them, you are going along with them, aren't you?
Right. Liberty Village will have to watch that like a hawk. You have to be very careful to always keep an eye on formal consensus decision making. The actual line is formal consensus of the group and enforcement of its decision. Basically, it's a fake democracy. You have 6, 7 people, like in one situation out of the McKenzie River in Oregon. The group of 5 came in. They took over 500 people that were outraged, and they created the group of 5 with the very people that caused the problems in the first place, that were definitely part of the problem thing. And they used formal consensus of the group. Now it amounts to this little tiny group of selected and appointed people. And of course, in tracking their partnerships and their vested interests, we always see the same cartels come in, usually with a lot of cover from a so-called non-profit organization. And in reading their charters of non-profit organizations, I found that the lawyers who are probably would be likely to support the planks of communism or humanism are usually writing non-profit kinds of charters and bylaws. Now, the reason I'm concerned with that is that in these meetings, the agency authorities and the folk, basically the ones they can recruit and do thought reform on or values reform, are associated together, and they're always in a little partnership. It's not a really legitimately disclosed partnership. It's just kind of we're all partners, and we're all on the same page, we're on the ground, something we can all live with. And these are all encodings. These are concept and speech encodings, and you'll see them in the collaboratives used like clockwork. And then there are techniques that these actually involve that are formalized techniques that are 150 years old. So Liberty Village people are going to have to take responsibility for liberty. And the way to do that is be able to detect when you're dysfunctioning yourself. If there's no health in Liberty Villages, there's nothing. And the reason is that the antithesis, the thesis was, the main thing was consumption, their sumptuary laws, principles of consumption, which we've written and delineated in detail. Now, people found out that that's getting too pricey, and the predatory nature of the fuel industry is beyond revulsion. In other words, when you pay $4 to $5 for gas at the pump, you just took away from the community's vitality. In other words, you could have spent that, half of that, $2 a gallon, could have went into a local business person's hands and their hierarchy of employees and so forth, and energy back into the community. But the overall agendas, we could go into some later time, but I want to focus on how a Liberty Village can detect things and what they can do to make it work.
Okay, I have had people tell me, well, you can't do Liberty Villages because of zoning, because of this, because of that, because of this community. I've told people they could do a Liberty Village in a neighborhood if the neighbors just united and planted a garden in their backyard and put solar on the roof. They could basically do a Liberty Village in a town. Oh, the neighborhood association won't allow you to do that.
Well, that's because their values, as human values, are bankrupt, and basically they're probably watching a lot of TV. Now, you can do it on private ground, obviously. You can do it in a lot of ways. But my attitude is not to incorporate it. Definitely not incorporate it or profit or non-profit. There has to be another way to deal with that. Once you're incorporated, you're finished. You're going to go according to fundamental public policy, and then in come the inclusionary reasoning.
Couldn't we do it as a private club? I referred to it as a covenant community, and I've asked you to basically write the covenants. It's pretty simple. You grow your own food. You don't use genetically modified. You generate your own electricity from every residence, every house, and we've got. Matter of fact, we've got all types of structures that are available. I mean, you can for basically less than what you would pay to build a stick-built house. We can build a number of structures that would be available, low cost, that you wouldn't have to pay for 3 times by the usury.
It's important that you have, if you're going to build a resilient and sustainable community, that you have to go. Remember, the teepees were built for movement.
Yes.
Seasonal. And this, what we're talking about, definitely is a resilient quality of being, and returning to some basic, and I don't mean basicity like abstract, I mean some very fundamental points of decency and social structure, and then having the technical structure, the infrastructure that follows it. Now, if you don't have that, then what will happen is it'll be a built-in paradox. In other words, one thing will fight another within the elements, and it all comes apart. And the reason we've had to go in and use the Infraspect audit process on this is so that people would have some sort of written framework to reference their own errors. And you have dysfunction, and you have type 1 and 2 errors. A type 2 error gets involved with the personal deviation. The declaration by indigenous people a few years ago, 2010, was really a fairly important document, and it laid out literally a way that all people could work together with. And obviously Art George and I did that. He was a Washoe spiritual teacher, and we work together to this day, and will continue. And that declaration, it has several parts to it, but it says we acknowledge and honor. And it starts right with creation, sovereignty of spirit, mind, and body, keep each natural person free to live, have values, beliefs, enjoy individual personality, attributes of life. So these are actually, I guess you could call them mores, principles. And it goes into inalienable, unalienable rights, the fundamental rights. And the Constitution certainly is involved with this. The global citizenship role model is nice and factual under the UN auspice, but really it says the UN makes the trade-offs at the world level. The other aspects of the Declaration by Indigenous People is that it acknowledges and regards sovereignty in places, sacred estates in the land, promises to unborn children. Now, the lawyers know exactly what I'm doing in this. They're not going to talk about it because they don't want it. Lawyers don't like this stuff. It goes into attributes of life as distinguished from aspects of society. I'll give you an example. Liberty is an attribute of life. A social contract is an aspect of society. Liberty stands apart from aspects of life. In other words, it's superior. The American Civil Liberties Union really, in fact, is dealing with qualified, limited, and supervised rights. And they did that by their association to the suffrage movements, and they put in affirmative action, and they put in protected group status. They created a paradox which in time would be used against them themselves. So really they defeated their clients, their persons of unsound mind going in. And they barely were able to fit mitigation. This is very important for Liberty Villages. If you bring in mitigation, or say under the so-called sustainability doctrine, remember this. In the environment, there certainly is pollution and toxification to a genocidal level, a warfare level. But in mitigation, and this is true to the IPCC level, which Thatcher created, by the way, and it says this: mitigation is when you feel good about the damages done. But really, here's what's really lying in the middle of ecosystem services mitigation. Ecosystem services is really derivative speculation. Cap and trade, exchanges, land trusts, all kinds of tax gimmicks and shelters that are right close to going against the Sherman Antitrust Act and RICO racketeering statutes. It's really close. I just need a little bit more on the RICO part, and they can go get the indictments.
Well, I've done stories, that came straight from the sources about the smuggling of cocaine into this country by the CIA. It's quite a racket, isn't it? When you bring in the drugs, when you go into Colombia and you kill the Medellin cartel, you set your own cartel up. You flood the drugs into the country with the help of a couple of ex-presidents, and you arrest millions of people, and we've got more people in prisons today than the Red China.
That's true. Let me finish this part about the mitigation, because it's important.
Go ahead.
The authorized depredation rates, in other words, legal pollution, are put in place. Mitigation has to fail, so you have sustainable derivative speculation. That means you make money off the failing environment. Say we log out a forest here, and we go somewhere else and we get an offset. We're not going to get that offset credit, that carbon certificate, that carbon credit, or tax some unsuspecting citizen or resident unless we fail. We have to fail. And that's why a University of Oregon professor of the Environment and Indigenous Affairs said, on the record, mitigation is when you feel good about the damages you've done. And I use that often because she was a top lawyer in her field, and that's all she could come up with. Now, what that means is this. It means that her mind is really in a frame of sentiment, of anthropology, of sociology. And conservation psychology really is all about mitigation. The stewardship contracting procedures that are being injected into Indian country are about failures. They're not about successes. And the money is being dispensed at massive rates on make-work programs. As you brought up, most of the programs seem to be a lot of government programs. That's okay for a recovery. You need that kind of a program approach to remediate the wrong direction that's been taken. But after a while, you have to actually go back and say, there's no more subsidy on the books for you. You're going to actually have to do something right. The more subsidy there is and the more government involvement in a community regime, the more the community is showing that it's failing. It's not sustaining anything. So at the aspect of Liberty Village, that certainly is something that you have to take into account. Now, the reason the drugs are being brought in, obviously, from the drugs, sex and rock and roll, CIA kind of thing. I don't even blame the CIA. It's only because they were infiltrated by people with political ideologies, and there it goes. Once again, it becomes a perverse system. And it was to distract people. If you look at the health situation on a reservation, which are deplorable on purpose, there's no mistake. It didn't just happen due to market-driven standards. You've got pops and toxins and the wrong food just being thrown at the reservations. And what, like the pink, the hamburger issue, came up with the pink slime or whatever it was, when they couldn't get rid of it in the open domain, meaning the non-Indian domain, they went in and offered it to Lakota people at their food banks and everything. So I'm going to write this in as part of a protracted genocide, because they actually are using this toxin to kill people systematically and gradually. Now, that's the same thing that drugs are used for: distract them and kill them gradually. Process of gradualism. And it leads us to a doctrine called order out of chaos. I prefer to think of it as this: ordered chaos, because there really is no solution on the far side except to destruct that which is present. The agencies out there that are dealing with the immigration warfare, the weaponized immigration, have a right to do so. It doesn't matter, NSA, CIA, FBI, all of them, because what people are missing is what they don't know. They can't understand it. And there is a massive warfare thing going on. And the agencies are certainly split. In every agency, there's a culture within the culture. But I can guarantee you this: I have a lot of empathy for the agencies under this existing high-risk circumstance, because a lot of people are so neurotically on board with their group that they cannot look at all information. And the reason we approach this, including drug problems in communities, because we have to address that, is we make sure that we come in and we run our audit process, our deep audit process, so we don't leave anything out and become skewed. Because what I see in most cases, and it doesn't matter, civil rights or environmental groups, most of them are their own worst enemies.
They are. They are. And
well, I'm going to work on the. I want to work on this principles with the people that are involved, wish to go forward with your Liberty Village. No matter how it's called, it's dynamic. And
the title Liberty Villages is going to be is my website, libertyvillages.org, and what we're going to do on that is list intentional communities. We're going to feature, and I'm going to do articles on, just like I did for motorcycle industry and Easy Rider on Made in America. I'm going to do stories on people that have broken away from the system, that have stepped up, that are generating their own power and growing their own food and taking control of their life, whether it's a community or a single family. And this isn't, Liberty Village is a concept, folks. It's not something I'm trying to make money off of. You know, I want to be paid for an ad. I want to be paid for telling somebody. I want to be paid for referring somebody. And yeah, I want to do that. I want to make a living just like all Americans. I write books and I do radio shows, but I planned the concept of Liberty Village for a place that I wanted to retire, because guess what? I don't want to retire in an old folks home when I'm too feeble to get out and catch a frisbee. You know, don't want to do that.
It's very important. Keep in mind this, and this is one of those matters that will always be missed. Liberty villages, the local community people that are taking care of their communities, whether it's a rancher, a farmer, or somebody in the city doing what they can to make it a cleaner, healthier place. Those are the patriotic people that are really providing national security. The UN cannot save America. The people that have integrity in each and every community, it doesn't matter what, are the ones that are going to provide security for America. The police agents that come out of the typical military paradigm come home and run around shooting people without really a need to, and so forth. Those are not patriots. Those are the worst and most shameful the contradictions to their own oath of allegiance that could be. And I've met them in enforcement. I'm an ex-cop, so I've done it. I've done police work and so forth, and I understand what's inside. And what I meet is a lot of vets coming back, and they're under treatment because they're ashamed of what they did over there, not because they were exposed to war, because I've been exposed to conflict and so forth in my life, and I feel okay.
I've said, you know, they want to have a psychiatrist analyze you, tell you you're suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome from going over and killing civilians, but you know, I think if you've been into situations, Vietnam or Iraq, and you don't have post-traumatic stress syndrome, then you are sick. Then there is something wrong with you.
Well, numerous years ago, about 15 years ago, I asked the Veterans Administration to help me on relocation and jobs and everything. And the administrator just looked right at me and that. And he said, well, William, I'd really like to help you, but the only way we're going to be able to do this, you got to go home, start using drugs, and beat your wife.
Yep. Well, that's we are being drugged. We are being drugged, and folks, it ain't smoking the pot out there. You know, it's not doing that that's drugging you. It's those pharmaceuticals. It's that Luvox with a 200,000% markup, and of course there's the alcohol and tobacco helping kill you too. So there is slow poisoning going on, isn't there?
Yes, there is. For the people that really want to, get in the right book, and I look at it this way. People that are all in the same
Discover what's really going on in the world that
right,
mainstream media won't tell you. At Truth Radio, you can listen live or listen to a large selection of archived programs.
All right. Thank you very much there. That's one of the shows we're broadcasting on, one of the stations. William Blair has been my guest today. We're almost out of time. William, I thank you, and I want to invite you back again, too.
Sure, those people who want to follow this, they can call me at my number if you want to. If I can give that number.
Yes, please. Go right ahead, sir.
541-914-8751. And the reality is that we can actually come in and help communities and individuals and get with this. That's the way it's going to work.
All right. We're going to be turning libertyvillages.org